Okay, well we're in Brett's home studio and we're going to talk about First Off coming up. So, starting off, how easily were you, Richard, assimilated into the band?
Pretty easily at first, because it was a case of just slotting in, and slotting into especially the role of the live guitarist, I had learned all the songs at home, before my first audition. I'd done my homework. And so it was a case of just tightening up the performances and making it sound really good, and that's what we did. We used to rehearse at a place down at London Bridge called Southwark Studios, and did lots of work there, and I actually think that we got it together pretty well for the tour in a very short time.
And of course you did go on tour with Dog Band Star pretty much straight away, but I presume that helped with the process of integration, so to speak.
Definitely. If my first, it was kind of like being eased into it, not sort of physically, because you have to immediately go on the road, but if the first thing I'd had to do the day after I joined the band was write an album with them, it would have been a lot more difficult. But I'd had time to kind of, work my way in there and sort of feel around musically and sort of basically come to the same point as the others about the kind of record that they wanted to make. And when we started writing in 1995, after the end of the Dogman Starter, we were kind of in tune with each other.
Yeah, I think we spent a lot of time kind of like playing records, just playing other people's records. We had that luxury because we were touring with Richard, so on the Dogman Starter. So he kind of like I played him things that he hadn't heard before, and we talked a lot about the kind of records that we wanted to make, which of course at first we didn't quite know, because you never quite know. But then after a while we sort of started talking about much more of a kind of a brighter kind of pop record really that we wanted to make, and I started playing Richard things that I don't know, bits and pieces of songs I liked, and he played me bits and pieces of songs he liked, and we kind of like joined the whole thing together.
How soon after your arrival did you record Together and Bentwood Boys then, which are the B-sides of obviously the last single off the...
Yeah, we recorded them in, it was December 94.
So that was after the tour then?
No, it was in the middle of the tour, because we did a fan club gig at the Heaven Club underneath Charing Cross, and that was December 94, and we'd just written and recorded Together and Bentwood Boys, and we kind of did a live premiere of it at that gig, I think. And yeah, those were the first two songs that we kind of got together, but I had already been, right from when I first joined the band, I was demoing on a little 4-track I borrowed from Matt, and I wrote what became Have You Ever Been This Low, and wrote what became Picnic by the Motorway. That music was all written in the first couple of months of touring.
I remember we were on tour when Richard wrote the music to Together, I think it was, wasn't it? Because we were all going, we were in Hamburg or something like that, I think it was somewhere in Germany, and we were all going out, and as we used to a lot in those days, and we didn't let Richard come out with us. We said, you've got to stay in and you've got to write something.
Well, I was too young.
And I think he stayed in his hotel room and you wrote Together, didn't you? And that was kind of quite interesting.
Still got it on cassette. I kept that because it was really vibey to me. This is the band, playing a song, the music of which I'd sort of the chords I'd come up with, and it was really interesting to hear the band making it into a kind of vibey piece of music. And Brett sort of had a few snatches of lyrics, but it was mostly kind of phonetic, and I've still got that tape. That was really good. That was me thinking, oh, thank God, I can write with them as well.
At what stage then, Neil, did you arrive in the band? Was this a bit later or around this time?
When was Together? Because I first came along about October 95. The band were
First hatched.
rehearsing down the road. I lived in Crouch End, and the band were in the Dave Stewart studio, the church in Crouch End, and I popped down one day to borrow a suit off Simon, because he was the only person I knew in London who had a suit. So I popped down to the studio in October 95, and
never left.
And I never left because I couldn't afford the bus fare.
Literally.
But so though you arrived and you said, "Oh, actually, we'll take on a keyboard player now."
Yeah, I think we were rehearsing or writing or doing something to By the Sea, and we obviously needed a keyboard player for that, and I think Neil started playing. I can't remember exactly what happened. He just sort of started playing, and I'm like, oh, you can really play the keyboards. I think it's quite good. And then, Simon, why didn't you tell us that you had this cousin that could play all these instruments, and Simon was like, so Neil sort of joined, and it was kind of one of those sort of things that we weren't looking for a keyboard player.
Yeah.
We weren't looking for another member or anything like that, but Neil sort of just came along, and he just sort of, I don't know, he just sort of fitted in really nicely. It just sort of seemed to work, and it was just like, oh, do you want to join the band? I was like, yeah, fine. It was kind of like this nice sort of natural thing about it.
Were you aware that Neil would be able to co-write songs as well, or was that?
No, not at all. I didn't.
I've got to say, because your flat at Chesterton Road, when you were first based in London, which is probably from September onwards, that's when Neil used to come over and sort of party with us, and he'd always play songs of his own on the guitar to entertain everybody, you know. And that was, you know, so he was
latter-day George Formby.
It was
when I wanted everyone out of the house, I asked him to play his own songs.
I used to enjoy them. But so it was obvious to me, you know, long before he was actually in the band, that he could write and play, and you know, was a competent musician.
So how easy was it for you, Brett, to start writing with new collaborators?
Yeah, it was fine. You know, I've so wanted to make a very different very different record from Dogman Star. You know, that whole process was very sort of, you know, the whole process of making that record was very consuming and tortured, and I kind of like, you know, writing with new writing partners was kind of part of the sort of exorcising that ghost, I suppose, in a way. And so I found it quite easy, and you know, the way Richard sort of approaches writing, you know, he approaches it in a kind of less sort of layered way. You know, his pieces of, you know, I've got quite a lot of economy in them, which I quite like, or I really responded to at the time, you know. And it was more flexible as well, you know, we kind of did things in different ways, which I quite liked. You know, the two songs that appeared on the album, Film Star and She, were kind of initiated by this sort of like very simple rhythm that I had, that I tapped on my knees, and then I just sort of sung this Film Star, popping up the bar, and Richard was like ding, 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 and just sort of like worked out a riff to it. It was a very different way to that I've been used to writing before. You know, before Bernard presented me with sort of quite complete pieces of music, and then I've written my parts on top of them. So it was a different sort of process, and it was I think a bit freer, and I kind of enjoyed that.
Were you conscious though? Were you attempting to make a record that still sounded like Suede as such? It would have been surely dangerous to turn up almost like a new band and not sound like Suede in some way.
Well, it was kind of weird, because it was like a debut for me. It was the first, you know, obviously the first thing I'd written properly with a band, and yeah, so it was like my debut, and I could tell that the rest of the band wanted to there were things they wanted to leave behind about the way things had been before and the way that was worked, you know, and in terms of like, you know, actually writing songs together in a room was something that they hadn't done for years, I think. And that was the feeling I got anyway. And there were certain kind of rules about, you know, songs not being too long and not having too much, you know, echo, reverb on them and things like that. I think those were kind of natural rules that the band placed on themselves when we started writing Coming Up.
But I don't think there was this sort of thing of, oh, it should or shouldn't sound like Suede. You know, I don't think that was. We're just Coming Up was actually okay. We had quite a clear idea of the sort of album we wanted to make, but it wasn't too self-conscious. It was just like, well, let's just write some songs kind of thing. And, you know, we were a kind of rock band, and a rock band writes in a certain way. And, you know, it sort of sounds a bit like Suede, but it sounds like a different version of Suede. You know?
But did you say, Neil, sort of bring old songs with you that were then sort of moulded into the Suede way of things?
No, not at all. I think I didn't, because I never joined with the idea that I'd be writing. It just kind of happened, really. So there was nothing that I'd brought along, really. I think it was quite an organic and quite a quick and quite a natural process. When I joined, half of the songs for Coming Up had already been written, and then the second half happened really quickly, like Trash and Beautiful Ones, and the couple that I wrote on that record. And looking back, it was all very concise and clear and very quick, and it's like we need a couple more songs for the album, and they just kind of arrived. It's like it was a very natural, easy process. It felt.